I never thought my own son would leave me sitting in a nursing home lobby while he drove away with the house I'd spent 42 years paying for. But what hurt even more was the phone call I received 3 days later from a lawyer I'd never met before. His first words were, "Mrs. Thompson, I believe your son made a very serious mistake." At the time, I had no idea what he meant. I thought I had already lost everything. My home, my independence, my trust. But there was something hidden behind that old house, something my son didn't know, something that would change everything. And when I finally learned the truth, I realized the house wasn't the real story at all. The real story was why my son had been so desperate to get rid of me. Before I tell you what happened next, I have a quick favor to ask. If you enjoy stories about family, justice, and standing up for yourself, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Now let me explain how my own son ended up putting me in a nursing home while trying to sell the house I'd spent 42 years paying for. My name is Eleanor Thompson. I'm 72 years old. I'm a widow. For most of my life, I believed family was everything. My husband Frank and I raised one child, our son Michael. He was born after years of trying. The doctors had told us it might never happen. When he finally arrived, we treated him like a miracle, and maybe that was our first mistake. We loved him so much that we rarely told him no. Frank worked long hours at a manufacturing plant. I worked part-time at a library. Every extra dollar went toward Michael's future. We skipped vacations. We drove old cars. We wore clothes until they practically fell apart. But Michael always had what he needed. Little League, college savings, a first car, a chance at a better life. Looking back now, I can still see the little boy who used to run through the backyard chasing fireflies. The little boy who would climb into my lap and tell me I was the best mother in the world. That's the version of Michael I held onto for far too long, even when the warning signs started appearing. And looking back now, I realize those warning signs began years before I noticed them. After Frank passed away, things changed. Not immediately. At first, Michael seemed supportive. He called more often, stopped by the house, checked on me. I was grateful. Losing a husband after 47 years of marriage leaves a silence that no one can understand until they've lived it. The house felt enormous. Every room reminded me of Frank. The kitchen, the garage, his favorite chair. Michael became my connection to the future. At least that's what I thought. Then little things started happening. Small things. The kind of things you excuse because you don't want to believe the worst. He began asking questions about money. Questions he'd never asked before. How much was left on the mortgage? Had the house increased in value? Where were my financial records? Did I have a will? At first, I assumed he was concerned about me. That seemed reasonable. But the questions became more frequent, more specific, and less personal. It felt as if he was studying my life instead of participating in it. Then he started bringing up the house. Repeatedly, "You know, Mom, that place is getting too big for you. You should think about downsizing. You don't need all those rooms." Every conversation somehow returned to the house. At the time, I thought he was trying to help. Now I know better. But that wasn't even the worst part. About a year later, Michael lost his job. At least that's what he told me. His wife, Karen, stopped working shortly afterward. Suddenly, they were struggling financially, or so they claimed. I loaned them money several times. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. I never kept track. They're family, I told myself. Family helps family. But something felt different. Every request came with a sense of urgency. Every conversation eventually turned into a financial discussion. Then one evening, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to hear. Michael had accidentally left his phone connected to my kitchen speaker after helping me set up a new device. A conversation started playing. I heard Karen's voice, then Michael's. I wasn't trying to listen, but what I heard made my stomach drop. Karen said, if she sells the house, everything gets easier. Michael replied, I'm working on it. The line disconnected before I could hear more. I stood there frozen. Working on it? Working on what? Selling my house? I wanted to confront him immediately, but I didn't. I convinced myself I must have misunderstood. That was easier than facing the alternative. And that decision nearly cost me everything. Several months later, Michael showed up unexpectedly. He looked concerned, almost frightened. Mom, I've been worried about you. The statement caught me off guard. Worried about what? Living alone. I laughed. I'd been managing perfectly fine, driving, cooking, paying bills, gardening, yet he kept insisting things weren't safe. He pointed out minor issues, a forgotten grocery list, a misplaced pair of glasses, normal things everyone does, but he treated them like signs of decline. Over the next few weeks, he became increasingly persistent. Then he introduced the idea of a nursing home. I nearly laughed. I wasn't bedridden. I wasn't incapable. I was independent. Yet somehow he kept framing it as temporary. Just a short stay. Just until things could be evaluated. Just until I adjusted. The pressure became relentless. Every conversation, every visit, every phone call. Eventually, I started questioning myself. Maybe I was getting older. Maybe he saw something I didn't. Maybe he truly cared. The hardest thing about betrayal is that it often arrives disguised as concern. And I didn't realize that until it was too late. The day he moved me into the nursing home is burned into my memory. He packed my belongings, loaded them into his SUV, handled all the paperwork. Everything happened quickly. Too quickly. I remember sitting in the lobby watching residents shuffle past with walkers and wheelchairs. A terrible feeling settled in my chest. This wasn't temporary. I knew it. Michael hugged me, told me he loved me, promised to visit. Then he drove away. I watched his vehicle disappear through the front windows. And for the first time in my life, I felt abandoned. 3 days later, a nurse handed me a note. Someone had called asking for me, a lawyer. I didn't recognize the name. I almost ignored it. Thank God I didn't. Because that phone call changed everything. The lawyer introduced himself as Daniel Mercer. His voice sounded cautious, professional, concerned. He asked whether I had authorized the sale of my home. I was confused. What sale? There was a long silence. Then he asked another question. Mrs. Thompson, are you aware your property is currently under contract? I nearly dropped the phone. Under contract? My house? I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't agreed to sell. My heart started pounding. Daniel explained that his office had become involved because irregularities had appeared during the title review process. Something wasn't adding up. And what he discovered next would expose far more than a simple real estate transaction. The following week, Daniel visited me in person. He carried a thick folder. Inside were copies of documents related to my home. Some contained my signature, or at least something that looked like my signature. But I knew immediately they weren't real. The handwriting was close, very close, yet not mine. Someone had forged them. I felt physically sick. Daniel explained that a buyer's attorney had raised concerns. The signatures appeared inconsistent. That triggered a deeper review. As we examined the paperwork, another problem surfaced, one much bigger than forgery. And when Daniel showed me the document, I couldn't believe my eyes. Years earlier, Frank had created a legal trust. I vaguely remembered signing paperwork with him. But after his death, I rarely thought about it. The trust contained a provision involving the house. a provision neither Michael nor I fully understood at the time. According to the trust, ownership of the property could not be transferred without approval from both trustees. I was one trustee. The second trustee wasn't Michael. It was Daniel's law firm. Frank had arranged it decades earlier. Apparently, he'd worried about protecting the house if either of us became vulnerable later in life. In other words, Michael never actually had the authority to sell it. Even if the forged signatures had succeeded, the transaction would have collapsed. The moment I heard that, a strange mixture of relief and heartbreak washed over me. Frank had protected me, even from our own son. And I thought the nightmare was over. I was wrong. Daniel continued investigating. What he uncovered shocked me. Michael wasn't simply trying to sell the house. He was drowning in debt, credit cards, personal loans, missed payments. There were even legal notices. The pressure had become overwhelming. He viewed my home as a solution, not me, the house, the property, the money. For months he'd been planning how to access it. Every conversation, every expression of concern, every discussion about my future, it had all been leading toward one goal: selling the house. The realization shattered something inside me, not because of the money, because of what it revealed. My son had stopped seeing me as his mother. He had started seeing me as an asset. A few days later, Daniel asked if I wanted to take legal action. The answer surprised even me. Yes, I did. Not out of revenge, out of self-respect. There comes a point in life when protecting your dignity matters more than protecting someone's excuses. The investigation moved forward. The sale was halted. The forged documents became evidence. And suddenly Michael found himself answering questions he never expected. Questions from attorneys. Questions from authorities. Questions he couldn't avoid. Then he called me. For the first time in weeks. The conversation lasted less than 10 minutes. At first he sounded angry, defensive. He claimed everything was a misunderstanding. Then he blamed stress. Then debt. Then Karen. Then circumstances. Everyone except himself. Finally, I asked one question. A question that silenced him. Michael, when did you stop seeing me as your mother? The silence that followed felt endless. Eventually, he whispered, I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it already had. And we both knew it. Over the following months, the truth became impossible for him to escape. The nursing home arrangement was terminated. I returned to my house. Walking through the front door felt emotional. Every room carried memories. But now, those memories felt different. Not because the house had changed. Because I had. I understood something important. Growing older doesn't mean surrendering your voice. It doesn't mean handing over your rights. And it certainly doesn't mean accepting mistreatment from people simply because they're family. Meanwhile, Michael faced serious consequences. Financially, legally, personally, his plans collapsed completely. The quick money he'd been counting on never arrived. Relationships suffered. Trust disappeared. And for the first time in his life, he had to confront the results of his own choices. About a year later, he asked to meet. Part of me didn't want to go, but another part needed closure. We met at a small diner. He looked older, tired, humbled for the first time. He didn't make excuses. He apologized. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just honestly. He admitted he'd become obsessed with solving his financial problems. He convinced himself that what he was doing would eventually benefit everyone. By the time he realized how far he'd gone, he was trapped in his own decisions. I listened. Then I told him something I'd spent months learning myself. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. One can exist without the other. I forgave him, but rebuilding trust would take much longer. And that was a consequence he had to accept. Today I'm still living in that same house, The roses Frank planted still bloom every spring. The porch still creaks. The kitchen still catches the morning sunlight. Life isn't perfect. Families rarely are. But I sleep peacefully, knowing I protected myself when it mattered most. Sometimes people ask whether I regret taking action against my son. My answer is always the same: no. Because standing up for yourself isn't cruelty, it's necessity, especially when others assume you won't. And if there's one lesson I hope every senior watching this remembers, it's this: love your family, help your family, support your family when you can, but never give away your dignity in the process. Growing older does not make your voice less valuable, your life less important, or your rights less real. Trust should be earned, not assumed, even within a family. And sometimes the greatest act of self-respect is refusing to let someone write the ending of your story for you. Because no matter your age, you still have the right to protect what you've built. And no one, not even your own child, has the right to take that away. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done if you were in my position? Would you have forgiven your son? Thank you for spending this time with me. Remember, no matter your age, your voice matters, your rights matter, and your story matters. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.